You're live.
Welcome to Stepping Stones with Caroline Stevens. Today I'm interviewing Albert Burgess on Skype from Oxfordshire. Albert, you'll remember that I interviewed you on Basis 86 Part 1 on the English Constitution.
Yeah.
Today you're going to be talking about Oaths and the Queen. We're now moving into the marching season, the protest season. Albert, how can the English Constitution and your knowledge help the people who are contemplating going on these marches? Over to you, Albert.
Well, I think the problem is that the Home Secretary now has said, hasn't he, that all of the people who are marching are far-right terrorists.
Far-right terrorists?
Yeah,
I'm going on a march next weekend. I wouldn't think that I was a far-right terrorist.
Well, that is what he has said. But I think government are running scared, and by calling us all terrorists, that allows us to be shot, because you shoot terrorists, because that's what you do with them.
Are they allowed to? They're allowed to do that. That's.
Yeah, I mean, look at de Menezes. They thought he was a terrorist. They shot him and killed him, didn't they?
Yes.
So if they call you a terrorist and you don't disprove that fact, then in fact what happens is that you become subject to whatever strict measures of control the government feel are appropriate to deal with you. But we're not terrorists. What we are is patriotic English people who are thoroughly hacked off with what's been going on over the last 40, 50 years in our country. Our history has been written out of our schools. Our independence as a nation has been surrendered to Europe. We have so much stuff going on. So we have to overcome that. We have to, in one hit, prove to the world that we are not terrorists. We are, in fact, loyal subjects of Her Majesty. And what I would say is that the easiest way to do that is for, at every march that we have, for if we can get one, a bishop, if not a Church of England priest, to come in and get everybody to take the oath of allegiance to the Queen, because you can't be loyal to the Queen and a terrorist.
Right, Albert, so can I just stop you there? We've got a bit of crackling there, haven't we?
That's only local.
Okay, so when you said patriotic Englishman, you do mean patriotic Welshman, patriotic Scots?
Well, I lump the whole lot in, because from the Anglo-Saxon times, the Anglo-Saxons got fed up with the Scots raiding south of the border, and they went up and trashed the Scots. And the Scots kingdom was, in fact, an English dukedom at the time. They made it a dukedom, so that, in fact, the Welsh, the English, the Irish, we've all been so intermingled for so long now that. Scotland and Wales and Ireland are simply counties of England, really. And that's the way I see it. But we're all one nation. I'm not being derogatory to the Scots. I've always said if I was being shot at, I'd rather have 10 blokes from an inferior Scottish regiment with me than 100 of the best the Americans could offer. Because frankly, we all have so much in common. And for hundreds of years, realistically, we've been one kingdom for hundreds of years. Edward III was the English king that gave the Scots the right to keep their own law after he had captured Scotland and the Scottish King David. The Scots refused to ransom David back, so he lived in the Tower of London in some splendour for 18 months, and then Edward decided he'd release him back to Scotland, but he would rule Scotland as a vassal king. And the only English law that was in
though initially, because with it being the marching season, what can we do? We were talking about people organising these marches, about the oaths.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that if we all take the oath of allegiance to the Queen, then in fact we cannot be loyal subjects of the Queen's and terrorists. We also asked the police who are present at the march if they would join us in taking the oath of allegiance to the Queen.
So when you say take the oath, excuse me, I might be being very thick here, But an oath, do you actually have to sign something, or do you actually have to recite?
You have somebody, you have a magistrate, a judge, or a bishop, or a priest stand in front of you with a Bible in one hand. You put your right hand in the air. He reads off a card what you've got to say. You repeat it. When he says I, you then put your name in, and then you go through the rest of the oath following him. And that's how you take your oath of allegiance.
Right, Albert, let me just stop you there again then. So what we need to do then is to reach out to those people who are organising the marches and to ask them if they can find somebody that fits the bill. And they really should be on the platform, surely, with the Bible.
Yes, of course, they should. I mean, if we get a Church of England bishop to come along and do it, then that Church of England bishop should be talking about the fact that we need to be pushing the Church of England as a state religion, and it should be taught under religious education, and it should be the only religion taught under religious education, because this is England and we have our own church, and so we should only ever teach as religious education the teachings of the Church of England. The fact of the matter is that when I was at school, when we did Islam in school, we did Islam because we were dealing with the Middle East. When we did Buddhism, we did Buddhism because we were dealing with the Chinese, and we were learning in geography. We did them in geography, and the religion was put into the geography lesson in exactly the same way as how they earn their livings, how they live, what products they make. And what they eat, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's really quite interesting, isn't it? Because we did, as you rightly said, certainly in your day, Albert, they were talking about those religions because it was in a different part of the world. And obviously now we have got a situation where we're talking about Islam being a very major player, if you like, in the UK today.
Well, it can't be a major player because English law takes precedence over everything, and so Islam is no different really to Sikhism or Buddhism or anything else, Hinduism or any of the other religions. The only difference is that Islam is by and large far more trouble to us because we don't get Sikhs going out creating the problems that Islam has created.
No, I mean, especially with the Sharia courts and...
Yeah, and in point of fact, there is a government report out on the Sharia courts. What they've decided is that there's no good the government banning Sharia courts, or Sharia tribunals is what they call them. There's no good them banning them because they will simply go underground and we won't know about them. But what they are doing is they've drawn up a list of guidelines which make the Sharia tribunals comply with English law. Now, of course, unless you're going to have somebody sat there watching every particular case that goes before the tribunal, you're not going to know how closely they follow that ruling. But the fact is the government have said that Sharia courts have to comply with English law and that they are not courts. And if you have an Islamic wedding and they get married, that wedding has to be recorded in exactly the same way as your wedding and my wedding were by the local registrar. And if they're not recorded by the local registrar, as far as this country is concerned, you're not married, you're just living in sin. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and this is actually what it says in the report. So basically, we're looking at the fact that we have to keep English law superior to everything else in this country. Because by and large, English law is the most sensible law, and it's very good law. And if you take Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights, which government will tell you they have, they've repealed lots of it, they can't repeal any of it because Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights are simply, and this is pointed out, I've been saying it for years, but it's been pointed out.
And we're going back to the Magna Carta of 1215 as well.
Yes. But Magna Carta 1215 was not the beginning of our law because that was just a virtual rewrite of the Charter of Liberties of 1100, which was a virtual rewrite of the laws of William I, which was a virtual rewrite of the laws of Edward the Confessor, which was a rewrite of the laws of Alfred the Great, who gave us the law in the first place. So we can trace our law from Alfred the Great right up until 1972 in one continual thing, where it's simply the same laws being reissued over and over again every time we get a different king, and they reissue the law in that king's name. But originally, if you look at the legal codes of Alfred, and if you look at the Bill of Rights, they all contain the same things.
So basically, the first point we've covered is anybody organising a march, we need to have somebody there in authority with a Bible, and people now need to start swearing their oaths to the Queen. Now,
Yeah.
I mentioned to you before we came on air that I'd already completed my Article 61 oath. Yeah. And
Yeah.
how would that impact on
Well,
the fact that I took my oath at a forthcoming march to the Queen?
Well, yeah, but you see, the point is, when I was 12, it is the law in this country still, and it always has been the law. From the age of 12, every person in this country, certainly every man in this country, from the age of 12, had to take an oath of allegiance to the crown. You had to at 12. When I was at school, and we were all marched into the assembly hall,
Really?
and we had the local priest and a local magistrate, and the priest brought the Bible from the school, from the church, the big one, and we all were made to take the oath of allegiance to the crown.
When did they stop that then?
Well, people are just ignoring it, but it's still the law. It should be done.
So why are the schools not doing that then? Is it not part of Ofsted requirement?
Because government want to undermine the crown. Government have been set out, and I did send you a print up before we started this. I did send it to you on the power grab that the House of Commons has been on since 1297, and gradually they are stealing more and more power and more authority, both from the King and from the House of Lords, until finally in 1911, after Edward VII died, and I personally think he was probably killed, and I'd quite be interested in the toxicology on Edward VII. But I mean, basically, after he had died, George V came to the throne. He was told by a government minister that you keep all of your prerogatives, but you can't use any of them unless you have a backing of a government minister. Well, the main prerogative that the king has, the most important one, is the ability to say no to government. And yet he's being told you can't say no to government unless government agree with you. And that's never going to happen, is it? So basically, they stole a royal prerogative. Queen Elizabeth's father, when he came to the throne, there was a bit of a constitutional turmoil with his older brother having to abdicate. But when he came to the throne, he was almost immediately thrown into a world war. So he spent his reign, the bulk of his reign, wearing himself out fighting a world war, so that make sure that we won it. And when they went to the Normandy landings, the king said that he wanted to go in with the first wave of soldiers. He wanted to attack the beaches with the soldiers. Churchill said he couldn't. Government won't let you go. You're too valuable. But Churchill said, well, I'm going. And the king said, well, no, you're not. If I'm too valuable, so are you. So you can't go either. And the king stopped him going. Queen Elizabeth, when she came to the throne, she was 22. But from the age of 12 until she came to the throne at 22, she'd been educated in constitutional law by a man called Sir Henry Martin. Henry Martin was a Fabian. There is no way that he would tell her the exact correct constitutional position. And apart from anything else, ever since the 1860s, when government grabbed with both hands Professor Dicey's book on the Constitution, in which he says that Parliament is supreme, and they grabbed that with both hands. Because
I bet they did.
Yeah, they grabbed that. But the fact is, Dicey is provably wrong.
I bet that Dominic Grieve read that book from cover to cover, don't you reckon?
Oh, I'm sure he did. And in fact, it's what's taught in universities today. The Dicey law is taught in universities today.
And that's not common law. That's not classed as common law, is it?
No, it isn't. what is common law is Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights are declaratory of the common law, and which is why they are outside the reach of Parliament, because all they're doing is saying this was the law 1,000 years ago, if this was the law 500 years ago, it's still the law today because you can't change it in Parliament. Parliament, on the other hand, because they believe dicey that they are supreme, they think they can do what they like. And they evidence that by saying that firstly they say they rule by Henry VIII's powers. Now, Henry VIII's powers were illegal when Henry VIII, an arrogant bully, used them. Secondly, they say to you, we could pass a law in Parliament that says all blue-eyed baby boys born in June have to be killed. That would be the law, and every blue-eyed baby boy born in June would have to be killed. Well, that's ridiculous, isn't it? If you've got a Parliament that thinks it can do that, it's totally out of control, isn't it? But you see, it can't, because Sir Edward Coke, who was the Chief Justice in 1628, he said Parliament may sometimes pass a law which is against common right and reason, which is repugnant or impossible to perform. Well, killing babies because they were born in June and July, or June with blue eyes, is repugnant, isn't it? I mean, that is totally repugnant.
But you know, listening to you, Albert, all the things that our Parliament is supposed to do on behalf of the people, it really crystallises the fact that all our MPs are obviously committing treason, because, you know, to allow, you know, I mean, the EU, you know, later on this year, they're talking about censoring the internet to an extent where we can't share posts, we can't link websites to another website. There's got this Article 13 debate. I mean, well, how dare they?
Well, the fact of the matter is that suits government. It suits our government, because our government are out of control. I said to my member of Parliament one day about something. I'd put up a petition to Parliament. I asked him if he'd put it forward. He said he hadn't, and I said, why not? And he said, well, I didn't want to. And I said, but there is a can't think what they call it, but there is a thing that was a resolution passed by the House of Parliament in 1609, in March 1609, that said that any commoner must have the right to petition the House of Commons on any subject, and the House of Commons must receive it. What they do with it once they've got it and they've received it is up to them, but they must receive it. And I petitioned the House of Commons that a couple of our politicians were totally unfit for office, and I wanted them removed.
Are you just saying a couple? Just two?
Well, but I was being selective, right?
Very.
I mean, I think we had Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and Jack Straw were the ones I went for, right? And basically, I wanted them removed. And Tony Blair, because he was totally out of control and was signing us away to foreign powers. Gordon Brown, because he'd made a right pig's ear of the economy and wasn't fit to run it. And Jack Straw, because he'd allowed laws to go on the statute books which contravened their ancient constitution and therefore wasn't fit to run the legal system in this country. I asked if that could go forward as a petition to Parliament, knowing full well that the only other time that this had been done, the 5 people who petitioned Parliament were sent to stand before the bench, and they were all sent to prison. But, you know, I thought, well, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I wrote it. My member of Parliament told me he wasn't going to put it through. And I said to him, well, what you're telling me is that the House of Commons in 1609 passed a resolution that says the common man, and I'm a common man, can in fact submit a petition to the House of Commons, and the House of Commons must accept it. He said, yeah, that's true. I said, you're telling me you're not prepared to put it before the House of Commons. So he said, no, I'm not. And I said, so you're in fact ignoring and actually refusing to comply with the House of Commons resolution. And he said, exactly. Now I am elected to Parliament. I do what I want to do, not what anybody else wants me to do. And I think if you find out that if you ask anybody who's listening, if you write and ask your politician, your local MP, where does sovereignty lie, he will tell you it is with the elected House of the House of Commons.
Well, that's what Dominic Grieve said. I mean, I was very blessed actually to meet him.
Yeah, but Dominic Grieve is talking out the back of his head, because firstly, the Bill of Rights, which is what they say transfers
Yeah.
sovereignty from the one to the other, does not in actual fact say that. All it does, all of the restrictions that are placed on the king by the Bill of Rights were exactly the same restrictions that were placed on King John with Magna Carta, and they were exactly the same restrictions which King Alfred, when he gave us our law, placed upon himself. So there was nothing new in the Bill of Rights about taking the sovereignty away. But then on the 8th of March, 1784, there was a vote in Parliament following a debate which started in January 1784, after a 20-year running fight between King George III, who was actually a very good king when he wasn't ill. He was a good king, because he'd had this 20-year running fight with Parliament as to where sovereignty lay. Did it lay with him as the lawfully anointed King of England, or did it lay with the House of Commons as the elected House? William Pitt made a speech in which he said that was it better to be ruled by one despot, not that George III was a despot, because he wasn't, but was it better to be ruled by one despot or by 350 despots who could never agree? And the king won the vote. So by not only by the common law of kingship, but by parliamentary vote, Queen Elizabeth is the supreme governor of England. But you tell that to your member of parliament today, and they will say no. Now, up until 1816, the House of Commons never had a library. All of the parliamentary rolls were just lobbed on the floor of the room. I've got a very good book on the history of Parliament. All of the parliamentary rolls were lobbed on the floor in a room. So if a member of Parliament wanted to know who won the vote as to where sovereignty lay, he was knee deep in parchments, opening them up, looking at them and throwing them down again. And in 1816, they decided they needed a librarian. Now, it took him until 1834 to sort it all out. So you could go to the Cardex and you could find out what it was you want. It was on shelf 3 down and in rack B, right? So you could do that. In 1834, a fire surprisingly started in the boiler house, which was underneath the library, and the whole of Parliament was burnt down. But the first part to go was the library with all of the catalogued parliamentary rolls in it. So then Parliament say, well, of course, we are sovereign because the Bill of Rights say so. They completely ignore the fact that there was this vote in Parliament which said the king was sovereign. But what Parliament have misunderstood is, firstly, on the 9th of March, the King, George III, at 9 o'clock in the morning, wrote a letter to Pitt thanking him for saving the Constitution. But also, one of our best historians, a bloke called Hume, David Hume, had written a book of history, a 3-volume, very old 3-volume book of history. Mine was published in 18 something or other, but it's not a first edition. But in which they do a 3-page blow-by-blow account of the debate in Parliament on the day of the vote and the result of the vote. So we have a very prominent historian who is quoted all over the country in universities as being a leading authority on the history of this country, and he's saying that on day, time and place, this vote occurred in Parliament and the king won the vote. So Parliament can't actually say, well, that vote didn't occur, because there is other information that says it did. But it was very convenient for them that the first place to burn down was the library, which allowed them to actually turn around then and say, well, that vote never occurred.
So how do you feel then is Brexit is going? Because what I'm seeing is that Parliament isn't doing the debating in Parliament itself. There are no debates on, for example, 5G. We're having this rollout of 5G, which by all accounts will cause cancer. We'll be effectively on lockdown in our homes. What right have our MPs to effectively incarcerate us?
The fact is, you know the new police radios? They've got these new police radios. As you drive down the motorways, you see little radio masts every couple of miles going down the motorways. They use Tetron rays. And the police have known for a long time that these tetron rays, where the police officer wears the radio, if he wears it on his shoulder, he's getting cancer in the shoulder. If he wears it on his belt, clipped on his belt, and he's got an extendable mic to his thing, he's getting cancer around the waistline.
And have you got a mobile phone there at the moment, Albert?
I have.
Is it switched on or off?
It's turned off.
It's off, is it?
Yeah, it's off. Yes.
Oh,
it's off.
That's amazing, because we've got some interference, and my phone's off. It's off.
Well, so is mine. You can see. So is mine. But I mean, I was getting interference at this end.
Yes.
I don't know where it's coming from.
So he was getting cancer in the shoulder just from having his.
From wearing the radio.
Wow.
Yes. Because of what they call the tetron rays. Now the Police Federation, who you would think would be only too happy to look after the welfare of policemen, have known about this for years, but in fact have decided that they're not going to get that they're going to allow it to happen. And what it is that government are using the police force as guinea pigs to test the effects of tetron rays. So you give them a new radio, which is going to give them cancer, whereas the old radio, the Stornoway that I carried around, that you could actually, it was really strong and solid. You could beat somebody to death with it. They just didn't give off any rays whatsoever. They were perfectly safe to use. But the modern radios, which double up as a mobile phone, they give off tetron rays, which they know about, which are causing cancers in police officers, and they've known that for ages.
Do you know, I've never knew that at all. Have they compiled any statistics?
Yeah, but there is a retired police sergeant, Ray, I can't think of his surname, but he's been fighting this war over tetron rays with the police force for a good few years now, and he is, I would suggest, the authority on it, and basically, you know, we're in a situation where government are imposing things on us, like the smart meters, which we know are carcinogenic, and they're saying to people, well, you've got to have them, you know.
Yes, I've read that we are going to move to that stage where they are going to force us to have one.
My argument to that is, it's my house, I decide what comes into it.
Exactly.
You want to turn off the electricity to my house, turn it off. I'll go and get myself a generator. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And make my own electricity.
And, you know, we've got these cases where it's going to affect all our health, and people are totally unaware. It's like when they're canvassing on the doorstep, you know, for these by-elections, and you're asking people, what are your issues? The normal issues, they'll be saying, are hospitals or playing fields, etc., etc. But they're totally unaware that 5G is being rolled out and the impacts. So we need to get this word out to people, don't we? And then we've got the incarceration of people like Melanie Shaw. Are you familiar with the Melanie Shaw case?
Well, I haven't really followed it closely, but I know that she's whistleblowing on child abuse and that she's been locked up, and that this happens quite a lot. And, you know, you have to understand that the people doing the abusing, we now know, are a lot of people in very important places in this country, and it's in their interest to shut down people who are complaining about it. And what appalls me is the fact that the police force are actually doing nothing about it. And we're now getting a considerable number of police officers come out today and saying, well, when I was policing, I was investigating paedophilia, and I was ordered to back off, and so I did. But now I've retired from the police, I'm going to tell you all about it. Well, to my mind, they should all be in jail, because if I got an order from my superintendent to back off, if I was investigating paedophilia of any kind, and I was told to back off, my superintendent would hit the wall of a cell, because I would arrest him for obstructing me in the execution of my duty and misconduct in public office at common law. And I would put him in a cell. There is absolutely nothing you can do to stop that. And I'd said to a chief inspector over treason allegations that we were submitting from Thames Valley Police, Chief Inspector Howard, that I would in fact arrest. I said, I want Douglas Hurd. If I still had a warrant card, Douglas Hurd would be sat in a cell at the moment waiting for me to eat enough tea and drink enough tea and eat enough sticky buns to go and interview him. And he said, well, you'd be in trouble then. And I said, why is that? And I said, he said, well, you wouldn't be doing what you were told. So I said, yeah, but why would I be in trouble? And he said, well, I've just told you, you wouldn't be obeying the orders of your senior officers. I said, yeah, now tell me why I'd be in trouble. And he said to me, well, you wouldn't be doing what you were told by your senior officers. And I said, no, you missed the point. Any senior officer who ordered me to back off on Douglas Hurd would find himself in a cell next to Hurd, charged with obstructing me in the execution of my duty to detect offences. And I'd go on arresting senior officers till I was the highest ranking bloody policeman in the country. And there is nothing you could do about that, because that is what the law allows me to do. Because
so can you do can anybody do a citizen's arrest?
Well, you can, but with citizen's arrest, they're different. As a constable, I can arrest you on suspicion of committing an offence. So I have to know, for example, say you've got a neighbour you don't get on with, and you think one night, well, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to damage his car. So you go out there with a screwdriver and you put big scratch marks down his car. I know there is a crime being committed because the scratch marks are visible. I can see them on the car. If I have reasonable grounds for believing that you've committed that offence, I can arrest you. However, I can't make a citizen's arrest on reasonable grounds. Before I can make a citizen's arrest, I actually have to see you out there scratching the car. Yeah?
Right.
So basically, if I arrest you on suspicion, yeah, or if I chase you down the road having seen you do it and you've thrown the screwdriver over a wall and I catch you around the corner, I would have lost sight of you for a minute. So I can't say you're the same person I was chasing. You just look the same, but I can't actually swear black is white that you were the same person. I make a citizen's arrest of you on suspicion, or because that's all I can do. When the police refuse to go with that and actually release you, you are then in a position to sue me for compensation for unlawful detention and unlawful arrest, right?
Yeah.
Which means that I could end up giving you the deeds of my house. Yeah.
Right.
And this is the point with citizen's arrest. You actually have to see Harry stab Paul, and you have to arrest Harry before he's had a chance to leave the scene, and he's got the knife. You can make a citizen's arrest. Whereas as a police officer, I can come along and see Paul lying on the ground, and who did this to you? And he said, well, it was my mate Paul. And you go off and you arrest Paul on suspicion of doing it, and that's perfectly legal. Then you interview him in the police station. You take Paul's statement. You get a statement in the police station off of Harry, and you decide whether there is enough to make a charge. But citizens' arrests are really quite dodgy unless you actually see the offence occurring and you actually are able to make the arrest before that person gets out of your sight. And be fair about this, none of us have seen treason occurring, have we? None of us. None of us have seen a VIP like Jimmy Savile. None of us saw him actually abusing children or anybody else. None of us saw that. So to make a citizen's arrest on him would be extremely dangerous thing to do, you know. But what I also think is very wrong is, you know, when they raided Cliff Richard's house and they had the BBC along with all their cameras, some police officers somewhere along there, one or more of them, really should be out of a job over that. Because if I arrest you, for whatever reason I've arrested you, that is confidential between you and the police.
Agreed.
And it is covered under the Official Secrets Act. Right?
But so was it done on purpose, though, Albert? I mean, was it actually done on purpose?
Of course it was done on purpose. It was a policeman saying, I'm going to be nipping along to Cliff Richard's house tonight, and I'm going to nick him on a charge of suspicion of paedophilia, right? You boys make sure you get all your cameras there, and how much, by the way, are you going to put in my pocket for telling you? Yeah? I'm absolutely sure that's what's happened. But that police officer, as far as I'm concerned, is corrupt and he shouldn't be a policeman. Because not only should he not be a policeman, if you can find out who he is, you should actually prosecute him under the Official Secrets Act, which could send him to prison for life. And I think we should be doing that because we ought to actually send a message to the police that you comply with the law the way it's written, not the way you want it to be. You know, we see all the time, don't we, policemen saying, well, you know, I want a new law. We don't have adequate law to do this, so we want a new law to say this, that, or the other. You should never, ever give a policeman a law because he's asked you for it. Because you guarantee it's going to be used to oppress people. And so you should never, ever give a policeman a law because he's asked for it. And apart from anything else, it is totally unnecessary because our own English law covers absolutely every eventuality you could have. You know, if I throw a brick through a black man's window, I get arrested for criminal damage, but racially aggravated criminal damage, right?
Yeah.
If I throw a brick through your window, I get done for criminal damage. If I throw it through a black man's window and shout out, "Oh, you so-and-so, so-and-so," then I get, under ordinary English law, I get arrested for criminal damage. And the fact of what I've been shouting out aggravates the offence. Right? So that it makes the offence more serious because of what I've said. If I burgle your house and I get in and out and I get arrested and I get and I get charged with burglary. If I burgle your house and I've got a sheath knife in my hand, then that is aggravated burglary. So instead of getting 5 years for burglary, I'm going to get 10 years.
But anyway, when they give you a sentence, if you're on good behaviour, they halve the sentence anyway, don't they? And then they take into account the amount of time that you've already been in remand.
Well, I can understand the bit you've been in remand. I can't understand the bit of halving it because, you know, if the judge has sentenced you to 10 years in prison, then you should do 10 years in prison.
Yeah.
And basically, it's not up to anybody else to double guess the judge, is it? Do you know what I mean? And so basically, I think that the prison system, we've got so much crime in this country now, and most of it imported crime.
Yes, but but isn't that an offence to actually comment in that way?
Well, I'm going to comment in that way, and if they want to sue me, they can, right? we have the Islamic.
We don't want to be sued, Albert.
No. Well, we have. It's.
You need to produce your statistics.
Yeah. Well, this is what we call free speech in this country. We have the Islamic.
We haven't got free speech.
Yeah, but I have. You only don't have free speech if you don't use it. So we have the Islamic rape gangs, we have the Italian mafia, we have the West Indian Yardies, we have the Eastern European mafia. They are all running the same things. They're all running prostitution, they're all running drugs, they're all running street crime and robbery and all sorts of things. If you threw out all of the imported criminals in this country, our police force would be on holiday.
Well, I mean, the thing is with our police force, though, the cost cutting as well. I mean, so many police stations are now shut. I mean, I had an incident a couple of days ago. Somebody had parked behind my car. Unbeknownst to me, they drove off whilst I wasn't there, and they took the side of my car off. They failed to stop. And luckily, somebody took down their number plate and popped it underneath my windscreen wiper. Yeah. So I went straight round to the police station, which thankfully, because it was after 8:30 in the morning, I could actually get into the office. Yeah. It's in the council office now. Yeah. They've shut most of the police stations around our way down. And that is frustration in itself. So I get a crime reference number. And I said, isn't it a serious offence to just drive away? Are you going to contact them now? And they said, oh, well, we give them 28 days these days. Are you aware of this 28 days grace?
No. What would normally happen is you go in and you don't talk to the policeman behind the counter. You ask to see the inquiries officer. Because every police station is supposed to have an inquiries officer. So members of the public can go in and they see a particular constable, and his job is to take complaints from the members of the public and follow them up.
Albert, right? Can you just move your camera, your laptop front a little bit?
Well, my laptop is. I'm on a PC here, not a laptop. But
Okay.
anyway, so you go and see the inquiries officer. He takes all the details. He will then vehicle check the other vehicle, and then he will go and knock on the man's door and say, on date, time, and place, we're told that you drove into the back of this car and you've ripped off all the side of the car. What have you got to say for yourself? And he will say to you, well, I didn't know about that and all the rest of it. So you go and have a look at his car, you see all the scratches on his car, and then you report him for summons. And that is the job of the inquiry officer.
You see, I just don't think they're doing their job. I did actually. She did ask me, the lady behind the desk. She said, "What is the damage?" So I said, "Well, please step outside and let's survey the scene." But it's nothing seems to be immediate. They're not going to go after the person.
No, but the whole point of the issue is that the police force today are simply, in a lot of cases, not doing their job.
No.
They're not. I've just put a Freedom of Information request into Scotland Yard. I got their reply from the Freedom of Information officer, but I actually directed it directly at Cressida Dick and said, well, why were officers around the country told to lie to members of the public that the march that was coming off in London had been cancelled? Why were officers on train stations in Manchester giving people there a dispersal notice and making them leave the station when all they want to do was get a train down to London? Who authorised that? And the fact is that all of that, to lie to the public, to give them dispersal notices to stop them travelling, all of that is misconduct in public office.
Sure.
And the order to do that is not a lawful order. So why was it obeyed?
How couldn't they have been telling people who weren't even travelling to the march that they couldn't get on? I mean, how did they know?
It's quite possible that they have done that.
They might have been going to their daughter's graduation in London.
Yeah, absolutely. They could have been doing anything at all. Your old mum's ill in hospital and you've got to get down to see her and you can't because the policeman won't let you get on the bloody train. It's ridiculous and it's illegal. This is the point. It's illegal. When people used to come along and give me, as happened occasionally, I'll give you an example. I was involved in a murder trial and the inspector, being a complete idiot, decided to write me out. Now, I was the first officer at the scene. I went into the house where a man had burnt his wife to death by setting fire to the house with her in it. I went into the house with the fire brigade. I saw the fire brigade smash down a doorway to get into the room where she was. I saw her. She was in a wheelchair. The wheelchair is burnt out from underneath her. And she was, well, not a pretty sight, I have to say. But I saw all of that. I then went down. The regular Homeby officer, a very good officer called Rosemary Ford, came in and said, I will deal with this and the body, Albert. Nip down to the end there. You'll see a blue Ford Escort come up. Find out who's in it. One of them is bound to be her husband. Arrest him on suspicion of murder, which is what I did. The inspector then comes along and I said, well, I'll finish up here. I'll complete an incident report book. I will do you an MG11 statement form, all ready to go in the file with all of the information I've got. I gave him a list on a piece of paper of people who needed to be interviewed because they'd given me their names to say that this man had been saying for weeks that he was going to burn his wife to death and they needed to be interviewed and their statements taken. At the time I was too busy to do that, but I did get their details so we could go and talk to them later. I gave that to the inspector, told him that was. He then refused to accept any paperwork off of me at all. The list of names I'd given him miraculously vanished. And
it strikes me, just to finish off now, it strikes me that from my dealings and from other people's dealings with the police, if you offer evidence into the station, you would expect, certainly in a business sense, if you hand in documents to an office, say a financial company,
Yeah.
it would be automatic that you would be given a receipt that they have got your documents.
Yeah,
But yet the
absolutely.
police forces, it tends to be standard now that they accept things from you and they don't give you photocopies, they don't give you a receipt, and it disappears in a black hole. So, you know, with the paedophile cases, I mean, it's all going down that same black hole. So
What
we
you
know we
should,
need to clear out these MPs. I know
well,
we were gonna cover about the Queen and her innocence in all of
what
this.
you need to do, if you make a statement to the police
Yeah.
about anything at all, the police officer takes your statement in the police station, and the first thing you do is you say to him, I would like a photocopy of this statement. And he should then go away and photocopy it, right? And he should give you the photocopy. If you want a crime book number because you've had your car damaged, so you want a crime book number for criminal damage to your car, then they should record it in the vehicle crimes register, and they should then give you a vehicle crimes book number, a vehicle crime book number, right? So you do that. If you've reported a murder, then you get a major crime book number. You know, if you get it's a
But I'm
burglary.
assuming though that when you've got a case, say if you've got a situation, say with a noisy neighbour, and they give you a crime reference number, if it has to go to court and then it gets thrown out by the CPS, then that crime actually can be removed from the books, can't it? So it looks.
Well, they're not guilty unless they've been convicted in a court of law. But you see, the CPS throw out a lot of stuff, but you can make the CPS do the job. You know, I mean, I arrested a guy for drink drive. When we got him down to the police station, he blew 135, which is a lot. When we name checked him, he was currently serving a 5-year ban and a 10-year ban for drink drive. And he was also wanted on a warrant for failing to appear in court on another drink drive. So he got arrested for that as well. 2 weeks later, I get a billy do from the Crown Prosecution Service telling me they're not taking it to court. So I phoned them up and I said, can you tell me why this isn't going to court? This has nothing to do with you. I said, I'm the arresting officer. It's absolutely everything to do with me. I wonder if you could tell me why it's not going to court. And they said, we're not going to tell you. So I said, well, if it's anything to do with my paperwork, I need to find out so that I don't do it again. Can you tell me why it's not going to court? They said, we refuse to tell you. So I said, look, I have a system with my children. I ask them nicely to do something. If they don't do it, I tell them to do it. If they still don't do it, they get a smacked. I count to 3. If I get to 3, they get a smacked arse and sent to bed. Right? I said, now, I've already asked you nicely. I'm shortly going to tell you to tell me. If I get to 3, I'm going to come down there, and whichever of your solicitors made that decision, I'm going to arrest them for perverting the course of justice. And they said, well, you can't do that. We're the CPS. I said, you're not above the law. They said, well, none of our other solicitors will deal with it. And I said, well, in that case, I will arrest whichever solicitor hasn't dealt with it, and I will go on arresting you until every one of you is in my cells. And when I've got every one of you in my cells, I won't have a Crown Prosecution Service to prosecute, so I'll have to prosecute you myself. And because I'm very good at the job I do, you're all going to get sent to prison for perverting the course of justice. And when you come out, you're going to be struck off as solicitors. Tell me now.
Well, Albert, you've had a lot of success in this. I know so many cases now where people are being totally failed. More failures than actually successes. But if I can leave on a positive note, it's really a case of, for these marches coming up this summer, we need to have a man with a Bible on the platform to take everybody's oaths down, and the people on the platform need to lead by example.
Yes. And what they do is that if you can get a bishop from the Church of England, and you should be able to because it's his job to do it, then what you do is you get him to administer the oath to however many people are there. That immediately puts you on the side of the angels and not as terrorists. Immediately, if the police take the oath as well, which they probably would if the bishop asked them to, then in fact that puts them onto your side rather than anybody else's, because you've all taken the same oath to the same Queen, so you're all fighting for the same army. And basically it tells the Queen how much public support she's got to actually give her the strength to express her dissatisfaction and possibly just simply prorogue Parliament and say, right, that's it, it's all done. For the next 6 months, I'm going to run the country with a series of advisors. And then once we've got the thing sorted out to a certain extent, we will then have an election and we will lay down the ground rules for the election. And I'd like to see every member of Parliament as an independent member of Parliament, not political parties with the whips in action. Whips are illegal under our constitution. Votes in Parliament are supposed to be free according to the Bill of Rights. And yet the whips go in and they say, we know you've been playing with this little boy over here, so you're going to vote for the government or else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A whip has actually come out and said that. I mean, I would actually arrest him for not actually going to the police and for, obstructing justice in the case of the person that he was blackmailing into voting the way the government wanted him to.
Well, you remember the Tim Fortescue disclosures. They were quite well publicised, weren't they? Years gone by. One of the whips.
Well, there's been.
If you had problems, you go to the whips, and they will sort it out. And then you have to do the master's bidding forevermore. Anyway, on that very thoughtful note, Albert, are you promoting any books today?
Well, I would say that the Inglorious Revolution by Gerard Batten.
Oh yes, lovely Gerard Batten. Inglorious Revolution. Yeah,
Inglorious Revolution. It is an exceptional book, unlike my book, which is written for children to understand. Gerard Batten's book is more adult, but it is an exceptionally good book on the Constitution, and it is well worth buying and well worth reading. I think last I heard it was about £8 in the shops, but it is a good £8 spent because it will tell you exactly about the Constitution, and in point of fact, what it says. It is common law that binds Parliament. Parliament cannot change the common law. Common law binds Parliament. And
well, I guess that's great. It's great to have an author that plugs somebody else's book rather than their own.
Well, I mean, my book is very good. But as I say, it was written for children to understand. Gerard Batten's book is written for adults to understand. But it is an absolutely excellent book. And it contains stuff in his book which is not in my book, but it is a first-class read. And as far as teaching you the Constitution is concerned, it is probably, well,
it must have been a very difficult book for him to write, actually, because as you just said, ideally now we need to have independent MPs being sent to Parliament. Gerald Batten's written that book. And he's the head of a political party. So there's a bit of a dichotomy there, but I agree with you. We can't have political parties now going into Parliament. Albert, it's been a joy to interview you as always. Thank you so much from rainy Wiltshire. Look forward to seeing you again next time.
Okay, all right, bye.
Thank you, Albert. Bye.
Bye, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.